Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our live stream session. Today's discussion promises to be both interesting and informative. We'll explore the topic EB-5 versus other investment visas, choosing the right path for you. I'm Maliha and I'll be your host for today. The EB-5 visa, unlike other visas, offers a pathway to permanent residency for foreign investors who make a significant capital investment in the United States and create at least 10 jobs for US workers. Other investment visa options have different requirements, benefits, limitations, making it important for potential investors to understand which visa is best suited for their goals. In today's episode, we would explore these options and cap it up with guiding you on how to choose the right path for you. Today, I'm joined by a seasoned US immigration attorney. He has successfully represented hundreds of clients with various types of immigration cases, including investment, family, employment, naturalized based application, amongst others. Please welcome with me attorney Blake Harrison.
Hello, thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Harrison. To our audience streaming on various platforms, it's about to get exciting. So grab a notepad and a pen and let's dive right in. So, Attorney Harrison, to kick off, we would like to start with the foundational question, one I'm sure our viewers are eager to know. Can you give us a brief overview of the EB-5 visa and how it differs from other investment visa options like E2 and L1?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so the EB-5 program, it was created by the United States government to incentivize economic job creation in the United States. And so basically, if you invest 800,000 US dollars, and that results in the creation of 10 jobs for US workers, the government will give you a green card. And what's different about EB-5 as compared to the L1 or the E2 is that the E2 and L1 are both non-immigrant visas, meaning they don't lead to a green card. It's you have temporary work authorization through those. So that's why it's a great option for people that are wanting to have a more permanent immigration status in the United States. There's a couple ways you can do EB-5. Um, One is if you invest in your own business. We call those direct EB-5 investments. That's where you form a company, open a bank account in that company's name, transfer the funds into the company's account, and then invest the money, and which result in 10 employees working at your company. The investment amount, it depends a little bit on the location of the business. So it can range in anywhere from 800,000 up to 1,050,000, depending on whether the area qualifies as an area that has high unemployment. The government lowers the investment amount to incentivize more economic investment and growth into these areas that have a lower amount of jobs, in that area. So, yeah. So depending on the location, it's going to be either 800,000 or 1,050,000. So that's option one. Option two is the what's called a regional center investment, and that is basically regional center is a U.S. entity that has applied to the U.S. government to get what's essentially a license to pull together multiple EB-5 investors into and have those funds loaned for a large scale project. A lot of times it's a construction based project. So you could have 200 EB-5 investors investing in one large project. And the requirements are a little bit more flexible with that, particularly with the job creation requirement. They're not counting, full-time employees under that scenario. The government uses a model that's basically will calculate the number of jobs created, direct and indirect jobs, based on the amount of expenditures for the project. So it's more of a model determining what the job creation amount is based on the amount of funds spent through the project. So that those are the two ways to do it. Most people take the regional center route just because it doesn't require that you be operating a business, and hiring actual full-time workers at your business. Um, the regional center, it's I think some people think of it as being more hands off in that sense that you don't have to be there every single day, trying to grow a business. Yeah.
That was very interesting insight, Mr. Harrison. Thank you so much for answering that aptly. This brings us to my next question, which is dual faced. What are the essential eligibility requirements for someone looking to apply for the EB-5 visa compared to other investment visa options? And can you also speak of their timelines?
Okay. Um, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that question. Can you say it one more time?
Yes, sure. I'm so sorry for that. So the question is, what are the essential eligibility requirements for someone looking to apply for EB-5 visa compared to other investment visa options that we already have? And can we also speak about how it differs, the timelines
Okay,
from
sure.
different visa?
Okay. So yes, the eligibility. Basically, the main eligibility criteria is that you have the $800,000 to invest, and that you show that those funds were earned legally. So that's very important. The government wants to make sure that you can demonstrate how those funds were earned. So that's one of the main requirements. And then the other main requirement is that you show that the funds are going to create 10 U.S. jobs, full-time jobs for U.S. workers. So, um, when you file the application, there's a business plan that's included with it, and that outlines, how the funds are going to be spent and how the company will build over time. It'll provide forecasts for job creation and the details of the growth of the business. Um, and then in terms of the timeline, it's in terms of like the E2. E2 is not is only available for people that are born in certain countries or have permanent residence in certain countries. So for example, India is not on that list of countries, right? So if you only have citizenship or residence from India, you're not able to partake in the E2 temporary investment program. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So EB-5 is available to Indian nationals and all countries around the world, with a few tiny limited exceptions that can usually be worked around. But in terms of the timing, you know, it depends on the project that you invest with. Right now, there's sort of three main categories of EB-5 in terms of location of investments. You have the high employment areas, you have high unemployment areas, and then you have what's called rural areas. So the government is trying to incentivize investment into these rural areas, and so they are giving priority processing for these projects. So you could have your green card in 12 to 18 months, your conditional green card, if you invest with one of these rural projects. And then with the other categories, it could be quite a bit longer. Say 2.5, 3 years to get the approval of the EB-5 application, which is Form I-526 or I-526E, depending on the project. So, but if you do have nationality for one of the E2 listed countries, you can do that very fast. You can be over here working in just a couple months. So, some people do um, take the route of coming over on an E2 to get over here quickly. And they'll file EB-5, and while they're waiting for the green card to come through, they'll be here on the E2 visa. Another interesting thing that changed in 2022 is that you can now do what's called a concurrent filing, which is basically if you're here inside of the United States on some other non-immigrant visa, say it's H-1B, L-1, O-1, E-2, and it's F-1. If you're here in the United States, you can file both the EB-5 application and the I-45 green card application at the same time. And what's significant about that, and that's because the EB-5 category is not backlogged like the other employment-based categories, like EB-2 and EB-3 have very, very long backlogs. EB-5, there's no backlog in these new set-aside categories, the high unemployment areas. We call them targeted employment areas, and the rural areas. So because those are not backlogged, you can concurrently file, which is great because just by filing that application, the I-485, that gives you the ability to stay in the United States legally while you wait for the applications to be processed. And you can also file for work and travel authorization at that same time as well. So you can work within a few months, and then you'll be able to travel in and out of the United States a few months after that, while you're waiting for the processing of those applications. So it's that was a great change in terms of allowing people that are trying to be here more quickly or be here while things are processing. It gives them that flexibility to do that.
Great. Now let's talk about the benefits. I'm sure our viewers are eager to know how. So basically, how would you compare the benefits of the EB-5 visa to those of E2 visa and L1? Are there any major pros and cons to be chosen over one another?
Okay. Yeah. So the benefits of, let's say, EB-5 compared to E2, first of all, there's no country limitations like the E2, so it's open to everyone around the world. Where E2 it's limited to whether or not that your home country or the country that you have nationality from is on that list. So that's one benefit. Another benefit we touched on briefly is that the EB-5 program, it's a way to get a green card, which is permanent residence in the U.S. So that gives you the ability to live, work, travel in and out of the United States. And then you can eventually become a U.S. citizen if you would like to do that. Whereas with the E2, it's a temporary non-immigrant visa. So you have work authorization to work for your company that you invested in. But yeah, it is a temporary stay, and it doesn't result in a permanent residence.
Right.
Um, I think in terms of the pros and cons between EB-5 and E2, um, you can do a much smaller investment to qualify with E2, so that's a benefit. $800,000 is out of reach for a lot of people, but 100,000 might not be. So I would say that's a pro to the E2, is that it's more available in terms of people and whether their financial capabilities allow them to invest or not. So yeah, if you are lucky enough to be one of those countries, from one of those treaty countries, then you can come and live here and work for your company, with only investing $150,000. Whereas with EB-5, while you'll get the green card, the investment is substantially more.
Thank you so much for the valuable insight, Mr. Harrison. For anyone who's joining now, this is immigrationquestion.com live streaming program. Immigrationquestion.com is transforming how immigrants connect with experienced immigration attorneys. Ask your questions for free and we'll connect you with a verified attorney on our platform. We like to call it the meeting place for immigrants and attorneys alike. For attorneys, Immigration Question is your chance to grow your practice significantly. Sign up today and start boosting your firm's growth. We have a lot of questions coming in. Please keep the questions coming in. Our special guest will be answering them shortly. We are also open with the telephonic line. If you'd like to ask questions live, you can come live on 516-703-3483. I repeat, it's 516-703-3483. If you'd like to ask questions live, you can call us on this number. Thank you so much for holding, Mr. Harrison. Moving on to our next question. It would be interesting to address a very common concern, the risks. We understand that no investment is risk free, but however, are there any significant risks involved in the EB-5 investments as well as other investment options, and what steps can investors take to minimize those risks?
Okay. Right. Yes. So, yeah, in terms of the risks for EB-5, um, the regulations require that the funds be at risk, which means essentially, if the offering documents guarantee the return of the investment, then it does not qualify under the EB-5 program, and the application would be denied. So, um, while these don't necessarily have to be risky investments, they can't be there can't be a guarantee of the return of the capital, and so we would say, the terminology is that it's an at-risk investment. So the risk involved, I think there's two possibilities, there's two main risks, and that's that you don't you aren't able to recover your investment, and two is that you might not be able to actually get the green card if all of the requirements aren't met, right? So, so you can minimize that risk if you work with a professional team, and they can help navigate the process with you. I think someone that doesn't have experience in the field could get tripped up. So I think it is important to have a experienced team with a good track record to help navigate that for you. But yeah, so it is possible though that if you invest with a project and things don't work out as planned, that the funds could be, you don't have your funds returned back to you. It could be some of the funds or all of the funds. So that would be a risk that can be minimized again if you're working with a good team. Um, in terms of not receiving the green card, if, let's say, for example, all of the jobs are not created ultimately, then you didn't satisfy the requirements of the EB-5 program. So, and that under that scenario, you would end up not getting your green card. So you would have wasted time, money, and you don't have anything really to show for it at the end of the day. So that's, I would say those are the two main risks. The worst case scenario is it would be that you both don't get the green card and you don't get your money back. So there's different scenarios that could play out. Maybe you don't get the funds back, but you do get the green card. You do get the funds back, but you don't get the green card, or both. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. And the next question is, how do you minimize that risk? And I had mentioned that briefly. Is that these are really complex areas. You're at the kind of the intersection of immigration law and having a financial investment. So there's a lot of moving parts involved with these, and it would be really difficult to navigate it as someone just first coming to this and um, you know trying to figure it out on your own. So I would say definitely working with an experienced immigration attorney. You can also have a financial advisor to kind of help you select a project, so you're not going at it all alone. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison, for the valuable insight, and I totally agree with you. For such complex cases, it's always advised to go with an immigration attorney, and You mentioned that it's always good to have a good team. Who else could it be better than you? So if we have anyone from the audience who'd like to schedule an appointment, Mr. Harrison, you can give us a call on 516-703-3483 and we will be directing you to him. And if we have anyone from the audience who'd like to ask live questions, you can give us you can give the call on 516-703-3483 again. And thank you so much, Mr. Harrison, for addressing that in depth. Before we head over to the chat box and take questions from our viewers, saying with trends is important. So, are there any recent changes or trends in the EB-5 program that potential investors should be aware of, especially with respect to regulations or investment amounts?
Yeah, so there was in terms of the changes in the investment amount, there was uh, quite a bit of fluctuation for a few years, but there were new regulations that came out in 2022 that did finalize the investment amounts. So I don't foresee that changing. That's been settled. There was a time a few years ago where it did seem like there was potential for something to change at last minute notice. But at this point, that those investment amounts have been settled, so I don't see much fluctuation occurring there in the near future. Um, the positive changes that we've seen have been, that ability to be able to do a concurrent filing. And like where I had mentioned, that gives you the ability to remain in the United States while you're waiting to go through the process. So that's a great change. Um, and then in terms of trends, I think that, you know, basically in 2022, the government created these new, they call them set aside categories for EB-5. And that meant that there were new categories and there was no backlogs for these categories. I think as we move forward, we are seeing a lot of interest with people from India and all over the world in the EB-5 program, where I would say in the future, in the not too distant future, we could start to experience backlogs in those categories, meaning there's more people that want the visas that are available than there are visas available. So then in that scenario, excuse me, in that scenario, you get into something similar to like EB2 and EB3 categories right now, which is, I think, most people understand, or a lot of people understand that, you can start the process for EB2 or EB3 if you're from India now, and, you're not going to get the green card for decades, many, many decades. And while it's not going to start out being that large of a backlog, there would be some additional wait times once a backlog comes into effect. And, once the backlog does come into effect, then the concurrent filing of the I-45 would no longer be available as well. So I think if you're considering EB-5, I would, do it sooner than later if your goal is to get a green card as soon as possible, because, we do foresee in the next few years or so um, the backlogs, coming into effect.
Thank you so much for the valuable insight, Mr. Harrison. We have Mr. Nicole who's live on the call. He'd like to ask us the question. Mr. Nicole, you can go ahead and ask your question.
All right. So my question is this: if I have an EB-5 visa in the US and I come into the US but have to live in another country without affecting my residence in the US, if I have to live in another country.
Okay. So I believe the question was, if you have the EB-5 green card, can you leave the country? And so yes, so when you do have that EB-5 green card, that's a green card, so you can come and go as you please. One thing to keep in mind though is that before you have the approval Say if you're inside of the United States when you file, you're going to be filing, the EB-5 application, I-526 or I-526E, depending, the I-45 green card application, and then the work and travel authorization application. So you won't be able to leave the United States until you get that travel authorization approved, unless your non-immigrant visa that you have in the United States is the H1 or L1. Those visas have some exceptions, so you can leave and come while you're waiting to get the travel authorization. But if you aren't on the H and you're not on the L, and you don't have the travel document approved yet, and you leave, the government will deem your I-45 application abandoned, and it will be denied. So that's something to keep in mind, is that you're going to want to stay put here if you don't have the H or L visa until you get that travel authorization.
Thank you so much for the valuable insight again, Mr. Harrison. So, for everyone who is streaming live, this is immigrationquestion.com live streaming program. Immigrationquestion.com is transforming how immigrants connect with experienced immigration attorneys. Ask your question for free and we'll connect you with a verified attorney on our platform. We like it we like to call it the meeting place for immigrants and attorneys alike. For attorneys, Immigration Question is your chance to grow your practice significantly. Sign up today and start boosting your firm's growth. Attorney Blake Harris, for a platform that caters to the immigrants community and equally provides an environment where lawyers can grow their business and increase visibility. What do you think of immigrationquestion.com?
Yes, so this seems like a great opportunity for people to connect. The live stream seems like a unique platform to discuss these issues and questions. So I think that it's um, you know a nice service that's being offered here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. That's really, really thoughtful of you. So please keep the questions coming in. Our special guest will be answering them shortly. We'll open the floor now for question and answers. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat box, or you can even call us like Mr. Nicole called. Thank you so much for calling us, Mr. Nicole. You can call us on 516-703-3483. I repeat, the number is 516-703-3483 and ask your questions live. Otherwise, you can also drop them in the chat box and we'll try to address as many as possible. So we have first question from Najib. How does the EB-5 visa accommodate family members, please? I plan on bringing my spouse and children from Istanbul.
Yes. So the great thing about EB-5 is that you can bring your spouse and any unmarried children under the age of 21. They can all be included on your application with that one single investment. Um, so, you know, it's a great option for those family members, is for the spouse and children to come. And, if you do have a child that's over 21, then they will, unfortunately not be able to be included on the application. They're welcome to do a second investment or have their own application. But it's just those family members, spouse and children. It's not going to be, your parents, grandparents or anything like that, uncles, brothers, those sorts of things. It's just, spouse and children under 21.
Thank you so much for the valuable insight, Mr. Harrison. Moving on to our next question from Spencer Rukor. Can two investors pool funds for a single EB-5 investment?
No. I mean, in terms of like the investment amount. So if the investment amount's 800,000, if the question is, can two families invest 400,000 and then everyone get a green card? No, unfortunately. It's 800,000 per investor. So if you want two investors to be able to obtain a green card, they each would have to invest 800,000.
Thank you so much for the in-depth discussion, Mr. Harrison. Moving on to our next question from Mr. Mohammed. What investment visas are available for someone who wants to invest less than $8,000?
Okay, so there's only one other option. That's the E2 visa. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It's only available for people that have residency in a treaty country is what we call it. So if you just Google E2 treaty countries, you'll be able to find lists of countries that can, partake in the E2 visa process. If you're not on that list, the country that you have residence, then unfortunately you're not able to take advantage of the E2 program. So the investment for that is much lower. The E2 regulations don't list a specific dollar amount. Like EB-5 says it's 800,000. For E2, it's what's considered a substantial investment, which we definitely have people approved with $100,000 investment. So occasionally you can go a little lower than that and still have the approval. But yeah, those are the two investment immigration categories. One is a green card category at 800,000. One is a temporary working visa category at around 100,000, give or take, depending on the business.
Absolutely, Mr. Harrison. Thank you so much for the valuable insight again. We have another question from Lynette. Are processing times for EB-5 visas significantly longer than others?
No, I would say no. If you're doing like EB2 or EB3, that can be a pretty lengthy process to go through the whole perm process before filing. And then you have to go through and file the I-45 and go through the green card process. And then if you're from India or one of these backlog countries, then it's a very, very long time to get that visa. So I would say EB-5 it's particularly if you do a rural investment, it can be, for immigration standards, a very quick way to get a green card. So I would say that it's not particularly longer.
Thank you so much for the valuable insight again, Mr. Harrison. Ms. Steph is thanking you for the information, and so is Hockey Nation is thanking you for the information. Okay, you're very welcome, Ms. Steph and Hockey Nation. Moving on to our very last question, Mr. Harrison. How does EB-5, E2, and L1 actually benefit in different ways?
Okay. Well, so the L1, that's an intercompany transferee visa. So it's not exactly an investment type of visa. The L1 is if you are you're an executive or essential employee at a foreign company, foreign to the United States, and you've been there for at least a year in a certain capacity, then you could be transferred over to the U.S. branch of that company, whether it's a new branch or an existing branch. It's not related to, getting immigration status through investment. EB-5 and E2, the benefits are, that they're viable options to be able to come to the United States if that's what your goal is. The E2 can get you here pretty quickly with a lower investment amount, but it doesn't get you the green card. You only can work at that one company that you've invested with. But you can also bring your children and your spouse with you. With EB-5, the benefit is, you get the green card, so then you're no longer tied to a visa. You can work for any company that's hiring people, permanent residents. So it's you're not tied to just the one company. You're no longer beholden to the visa process like for with the H-1B. You no longer need like an H-1B sponsor and so on. It's just you're a resident. So if you see a job that you want, you can apply for it and go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison, for the valuable insights. Greetings for you too, Miss Lauren. We have Miss Lauren sending greetings for us from Tanzania. Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison, for addressing all the questions in depth. And thank you all for joining us today. A special thank you to our guest speaker who handled the topic with such precision and simplicity. You did justice to the topic, and we cannot wait to have you back on the show.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
It was an honor having you here, Mr. Harrison. We hope this webinar enlightened and answered your key questions on choosing the right visa investment option as it relates to the EB-5 and others. Visit our website at immigrationquestion.com to connect with experienced immigration attorneys who can guide you through your unique situation. If you missed any part of this session or would like to listen again, catch us on Spotify. This live stream is being recorded and will be live for listening in Spotify. Simply search Borderless Talk by immigrationquestion.com and listen to today's session and previous ones on the go. See you at our next session at the same time, Friday at 2:30 p.m. EST. We will have another seasoned attorney doing justice to the topic of employment-based green card from petition to permanent residency. Attorney Mr. Chad Graham will be joining us next week. Please make it a date with us. Until then, stay informed and empowered.